Hailie Deegan's had talks to join the Haas factory team for 2025. Kyle Busch is expected to return to Rich Choice Racing in 2025, and Corey LaJoie will not return to Spire Motorsports in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight those really quickly. We got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Chase Briscoe's 2024 Renee scheme that we'll see next weekend at Richmond. Scheme looks really great in my opinion. Love the colors on it. SHR's had some pretty good paint schemes this year. This one's no exception. It looks pretty good. Looking forward to see it on the racetrack at Richmond next weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Homestead Cup race as they have a title sponsor. The race is going to be called the Straight Talk Wireless 400. This is going to be, I think, the third or fourth new sponsor that Homestead's really has since Ford left their entitlement since 2019. We're going to talk about Straight Talk Wireless here in just a little bit, so we're going to talk about that partnership here a little bit later in this episode, but it's pretty exciting to see that Homestead does have a title sponsor for the event, and of course Straight Talk will sponsor them at Homestead later this year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking the Brickyard 400. As the 2025 logo for the Brickyard 400 has been officially revealed. It's been confirmed that the Indianapolis Oval will be back, so the Brickyard 400 is coming back in 2025. I really like this logo. It looks really cool. I love that PPG is getting involved with it. PPG, of course, has a 5-year extension that was announced last weekend. I think it's really exciting stuff. I think the logo looks really, really great, and I'm looking forward to the 2025 Brickyard 400 next year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Straight Talk. As it was announced on Thursday morning, that Straight Talk has inked a new partnership with NASCAR. Straight Talk, for those who don't know, is really associated with the Verizon branding. Of course, we already talked about that they are going to be sponsoring the NASCAR Cup Series race at Homestead Miami Speedway, and they're going to have some other things like vendors at racetracks across the rest of the year, and it's a massive partnership for NASCAR and Straight Talk as a whole. This is really exciting stuff, fantastic and great to see, and really awesome to see that Straight Talk will be working with NASCAR and will continue their partnership going forward. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Day. As it was announced on Thursday before the ARCA race that Corey Day will be sponsored by HendrickCars.com for Bristol later this year and Kansas Speedway. Originally, it was a 3-race deal, but of course, they have already ran a race, that being at Salem this past weekend, where I think Corey Day did a really good job until he unfortunately crashed out of the event. Corey Day is one of the hottest prospects out there in NASCAR. He's been super impressive, been very, very quick on the dirt scene, and he's only made 3 starts and would have finished second had he not gotten involved in the incident and wreck. I expect him to be a major contender at Bristol and Kansas later this year, and I think he'll be a major threat and contender to get victories done later this year. So I'm excited for Corey Day to get more starts and opportunities with Pinnacle. He's really high up in Hendrick's development program, and which they don't really have a development program, but I do think that if Hendrick started a development program back up, I think Corey Day would probably be the number one guy that they would go with. So this is really exciting stuff, really awesome to see, and nonetheless very happy and glad to see that HendrickCars.com and Hendrick Motorsports will be working with Corey Day going into the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Ross Chastain will make his IMSA Michelin Pilot debut at Road America next month, driving for Skip Barber Racing School. This is going to be the first time that Ross Chastain is strapped into an IMSA car. We've seen drivers like Bubba Wallace and Hailie Deegan, among other drivers like Ben Rhodes, who have competed in the Michelin Pilot Cup in the past. And Skip Barber Racing School has been involved with Michelin Pilot for many, many years. I think Ross Chastain, who I think is a very solid road course racer, I think will do a really solid and great job driving for the Skip Barber Racing School. I think he's a solid road racer and can get the best out of equipment. So I'm really excited about this. This is really cool to see for sure. And I do, like I said, I do think he's going to be very, very competitive. I think it's amazing and awesome to see that Ross Chastain will be competing. I think he could have a really good chance to win. The field is going to be super, super stacked. I do think, though, that Ross Chastain will have an amazing chance and a really strong opportunity to go out there and win the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge race at Road America in his debut. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about CJ McLaughlin. Now, we talked about this last week on the channel, but originally we all thought that CJ McLaughlin was going to be driving a 14 for SS Greenlight for 3 races this year. Well, there's been some clarification on this. According to Joseph Strigley and TobyChristie.com, CJ McLaughlin is going to drive the 14 car in about a month or so at Daytona International Speedway, and then the other 2 races, instead of driving a 14 car, he'll be driving a 07 car. That, of course, at Atlanta Motor Speedway and at Talladega Super Speedway as well. I don't think he's the greatest driver in the world. I think running at a super speedway is not a bad option. Plus, from what I understand, he's bringing a little bit of sponge and funding with him to really help him out. I think he can do a really solid and great job for sure. Hope he can do well. Just survive. Don't wreck the cars like you've done in the past, CJ, and maybe you'll get a lot of respect on the track. I'm not expecting him to really set the world on fire, though. I hope he can prove me wrong and do a really good job. But I'm glad to see CJ will get the chance and opportunity. But I'm also worried that he is going to cause a pretty major wrecking incident when he does get behind the wheel later this year in a couple of the major super speedway races. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about iRacing. Now, this is reported by Seth Egger from KickingTheTires.net that according to him, iRacing could be part of the 2025 Olympic Esports Games. It was announced not too long ago that there is going to be an eSport Games that is going to take place later this year, and next year, I should say, and iRacing, like I said, has been rumored to be one of those games that could be part of it. That is super interesting. iRacing, of course, one of the biggest online membership companies out there. We know iRacing is developing the NASCAR video game that's going to be coming out, but it's going to be part of different branding. I think this is really, really amazing to hear, and I'm just so excited to see that iRacing make it a chance and opportunity to basically represent the esports side of things. I think iRacing's got a really solid membership partnership, and I think generally it could put on a really great show and get racing into a very high highlight. 'Cause I do think while esports may not get as many people watching as the Olympics overall, I think having esports involved with that does make a lot of sense. So I'm really intrigued about this, really excited about this nonetheless, and pretty cool to see that iRacing could be headed to the esports Olympics in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Belgian Grand Prix. This weekend, one of the major races that happened while NASCAR IndyCar has been off is the Belgian Grand Prix, which of course is their last race before they do go to their summer break. Now this race was very compelling. You had some really good battles up front. You also did have some very interesting stuff that happened. Now originally, George Russell had crossed the finish line first and originally was the winner of the race. However, about 2 hours later, it was announced that George Russell had been disqualified from the win, and his win has been completely stripped. This means that Lewis Hamilton has picked up a second F1 win of the 2024 season and his 105th career F1 victory. Lewis Hamilton, the reason he won this race because George Russell was underweight in his car, 1.5 kgs underweight. It's unclear exactly what we know. Apparently, Mercedes has admitted they've taken responsibility. It's a tough break for George Russell because he was easily going to win this race. He played a really cool strategy, and I thought it was really going to work out for him, but unfortunately, it sadly did not end up working out, and he got a penalty for it. Nonetheless, congratulations to Lewis. I know he doesn't like to win this way, but at the same token, at the same time, you got to take wins when you do get them. Congratulations to Lewis Hamilton on winning the Belgian Grand Prix for 2024. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Esteban Ocon. As it was announced on Friday morning that Esteban Ocon has signed a multi-year contract to drive for Haas F1 starting in 2025. It's unknown how long the deal is going to be with the Haas F1 organization, but we do believe it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year deal at least for Esteban Ocon to join the team. There's been a lot of rumors and speculation of where Esteban Ocon was going to go. We had been hearing that he, because we lost his ride at Alpine for the end of the year, that he was looking for a new ride going into next year. This means that Haas F1 is going to have an all-new organization. We do know next year that Ollie Behrman will be one of the drivers going into 2025, and we also know that Esteban Ocon will be getting behind the wheel because Nico Hülkenberg is going to leave the Audi organization next year, and of course the other organization. We don't know at this point what's going on with Kevin Magnussen, but we do believe he could be headed over to sports cars in the U.S. next year. Nonetheless, it's really exciting opportunity for Esteban Ocon. We've seen Haas show a lot more improvement and a lot more speed throughout the year, and have been one of the better backmarker organizations so far as they're looking to build up their program. And even with rumors of Toyota potentially coming in to work with them, I think having Esteban over there does make a lot of sense. So this is a really great opportunity for Esteban. I think he's going to make the best out of it. He's done great with Alpine for many, many years, and I'm glad to see that he'll be joining the Haas F1 for the 2025 season. I think he's going to do an excellent and solid and fantastic job with the team in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing. Now, we're going to talk about 2311 Racing a little later in this episode, but Denny Hamlin was kind of talking about the possibility of maybe 2311 Racing opening up a sprint car team. This comes from interaction when it comes to drivers that are looking for more money and drivers looking to move up on sponsorship. And David Gravel had actually reached out to Denny Hamlin in the comments section on Twitter, and I think Matt Weaver is the one who quote tweeted this tweet as well. But maybe if Denny Hamlin has said that in the future we could see 2311 Racing potentially open up a sprint car team. I saw some people trying to say that this is going to be Denny Hamlin getting behind the wheel of a sprint car. That's not the case whatsoever. What is being said here is that if Denny Hamlin was to run a sprint car team, maybe in the World of Outlaws or maybe in the series that Kyle Larson and Brad Sweeney, the High Limit series, maybe David Gravel would be absolutely considered for that ride. And I think 2311 expanding to other organizations would make a lot of sense, right? Going over and running, of course, in a World of Outlaws or racing in a series, because we've seen teams like Trackhouse that continue to expand. They're going to be in MotoGP. They're already in there, and there's chances that we could see them come to IndyCar maybe in the future. This is going to be very intriguing to see what happens, right? Because we know Kyle Larson owns a High Limit series. We know Denny and Kyle are good friends, so maybe, just maybe, we could see Denny Hamlin form a team up there and work with High Limit as that series continues to grow. And also, you look at Australia as well, where they're going to be going over there in 2025. So nonetheless, this is really, really exciting to see for sure, and I really do hope and pray that 2311 Racing potentially could open up a sprint car team in the future and race in a series like the High Limit Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about JD Motorsports. Now, we talked about JD Motorsports about a week ago on this channel because we had heard that JD Motorsports may not be returning to the racetrack at all for 2025 or even the rest of 2024. It was announced that JD Motorsports had filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy and they were going through a reorganization phase. Well, speaking of the reorganization phase, where they let off a ton of their employees, it was reported by JD Motorsports themselves that JD Motorsports is going through reorganization currently at the moment, and they talked about the bankruptcy. Now, they're hoping to make a comeback and return maybe sometime later in 2024, and maybe if they don't come back in 2024, they could come back in 2025. JD Motorsports has been struggling immensely through the last couple of years with a lot of organizations like Colleague Racing being built up and Alpha Prime Racing being built up and other organizations like even SS Greenlight Racing that are starting to build up their portfolio. And teams like Jeremy Clements continue to get better and RSS Racing gets better. Teams like JD Motorsports, who were competing for a playoff spot not even 10 years ago, are starting to fade off, unfortunately. And it's a really big shame. But that's what happens when you have these organizations and teams that do have these alliances. When you have organizations that do have alliances, they tend to perform a lot better. So I'm not completely shocked or surprised to see this, sadly, that a team like JD Motorsports is kind of going through it at the moment. Do I think that they are going to get back to the racetrack in the future? Yes, I think there's a really great chance and a very strong possibility that maybe in the future we do see a team like JD Motorsports somehow make a comeback. I think it's going to be a little bit before that happens. I don't know if it will happen in 2024, but I certainly think if they could find a way to reorganize their program and get things better over there, we could maybe see them somehow make a comeback to come over and race in the Xfinity Series in the future again, because I really want to see them race in this series. It makes a lot of sense. A team like them racing would be really cool once again, and I hope there's a chance that we do get to see them make a comeback in some sort of form or capacity later this year and maybe in 2025. But then again, I do not expect they are going to make a comeback, unfortunately, this year. I think they're probably done. They might come back at the end of the year, but like I said, I do think JD Motorsports' chance and opportunity to be competing may be done at the end, and I don't know if they're going to be coming back. To be honest, I kind of hope they come back, but as of right now, I'm not really expecting it for 2024 and maybe even 2025 as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Galding. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Friday afternoon that domestic violence charges that Greg Galding had received a couple months ago have officially been dropped, and the case that he's been going through is no longer there. Obviously, I think I said this on the channel, if I remember correctly, that there's always innocent until proven guilty in all these situations. Greg Galding had been indefinitely suspended for this case that had been going on, and it's really good to see that the case has been dropped. And the other party involved, from Bob had reported, it sounds like everything around this case is officially done. It's really great to see. Now the big question is going to be, will Greg Galding get reinstated by NASCAR? That's up to NASCAR to make that decision. I would imagine with this case being dropped and everything being done at this point with this situation, I do think Greg Galding will get reinstated. Now, will Greg Galding get back into the sport? That is to be determined at this point, right? I think Gray is a very talented race car driver. I know he kind of struggled the last year or so with SS Green Lab. We got to remember, 2019, Greg Galding nearly made it to the playoffs on points alone. So if there was a team and organization that was looking for a driver like Greg Galding, they would think that they would absolutely try to take it, because he does have, I think, also have a little bit of sponsorship. I know the stuff that's been going on by Herman getting a chance, but I do think that Greg Galding does deserve another chance and another strong opportunity to race in NASCAR once again. I really hope a team takes a chance on him, and I'm just glad to see that this misunderstanding and situation has been really cleared up now. It sucks to see all this kind of going down, and remember, innocent until proven guilty until these situations come out. Very happy and glad to see that Greg Galding has had all this stuff cleared up. The big question will be, will he be reinstated? That's the one thing we'll hopefully get determined here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Legacy Motor Club. Now we're going to talk about a certain driver from that team, Eric Jones, here in the later portion of this episode. But it was shockingly and confirmed by Bob Pockrass on Saturday morning that Jason Burdett and many members of the 84 team have officially been fired. Now, Bob does know that they're still looking to run 3 more races for the remainder of this year, but it's unknown at this point if they're going to run the rest of the 2024 season. It's unknown if they're even going to run in 2025 as well. Now, going into prediction for 2025, I don't think Jimmy Johnson runs more than a race or 2. I think at most he'll run the Daytona 500 and maybe run the Coca-Cola 600, but I think that's going to be it for Jimmy Johnson racing in NASCAR altogether. Jimmy has not had a great year this year in Cup. It's been a massive struggle, and I'm a little surprised to see that they're continuing to make moves. We know Legacy wants to become a super competitive team. But let's be real and frank and honest. As much as I think Jimmy Johnson deserves to be racing still to this day, Jimmy has absolutely been struggling with Legacy this year, and he hasn't run really great. I know he was running good at the Brickyard, and they were having their best performance all around, and they were going to have a chance and opportunity to be competing overall for the win. Not for the win, but maybe like a top 20 perhaps. I just think that they've made a lot of mistakes, and Jason Burdett, I think, is a solid crew chief. I do think Jason Burdett will be able to find a spot to go to for 2025. I think he'll find somewhere to work. Maybe a team like 2311 picks him up, or maybe Dale Jr. and Junior Motorsports bring him back into the organization, because Jason worked with Junior Motorsports for many, many years. I don't see him working, of course, with Justin Allgaier going forward, because we've seen a good work with, of course, Justin and his crew chief, so I don't think we're going to see him go back over there and crew chief for Allgaier. Maybe crew chiefs for a driver like Connor Zilisch next year, who is rumored and heavily could be going to Junior Motorsports, who we'll talk about here a little bit as well. Nonetheless, major moves happening over at Legacy Motor Club. I think this team has been struggling a lot this year. Unfortunately, the 84 team has really been no exception. They haven't had the pace and speed, and there's been some massive and huge struggles with the team and organization. So it's disappointing to see for sure, but it's not shocking or surprising to see it overall that these kind of moves happen. You want your team to get better, and I really hope Legacy Motor Club can get better going into the future. So let's hope that happens, and let's hope and pray that Legacy Motor Club can find a way to get better as an organization going into the long-term future, and see if Legacy can absolutely get better. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. We have talked about Auto Club Speedway a lot on this channel over the course of the last year, because they were supposed to have a short track done by 2024 and even 2025, but that short track is still not done at this point. We saw a report that a crane had fallen on the racetrack, and many people have been kind of wondering, when is this short track that's been kind of proposed for a long time, when is it going to finally get done? Well, I think it was Steve Nawa, who's been doing some photography, and I think has worked at Auto Club Speedway in the past. He actually posted a new rendering that kind of showed they've made some pretty interesting and big changes. It looks like the track is going to be making some changes, set to kind of be what they originally were planning. It apparently is going to look like what New Hampshire looks like, or really high bank New Hampshire in the corners and the turns. It's going to kind of look like Martinsville a little bit, it seems like. Now, obviously, the track still needs to get done for them to go and race on there. And they're probably also going to have some testing done as well. Look, every time I see an Auto Club Speedway update, it kind of breaks my heart because I really wish we're still racing at the 2 Mile Oval. I get that they got all the money they got. I think it was $555 million or something like that, which absolutely makes a lot of sense. You want to sell off that land with how much real estate California kind of holds at the moment right now. It does make a lot of sense. They do want to sell off a lot of that land so you can get as much money as possible. That being said, it is very unfortunate to see that we're still not racing at Auto Club currently at the moment. I think the earliest, if we do go back to Auto Club, I think the earliest we'll end up racing there is maybe 2026 at the earliest, because we know we're not going there next year, though the schedule has not been revealed for 2025 at this point. But I do think we're not going to be racing there next year, which has pretty much been confirmed, and we're still waiting on if we're even going to race there in 2026 as well. To me, it's still going to take a long time for it to get everything done. I really hope they can find a way to get it done so we can be racing next year at Auto Club. In the next couple years, we can be racing at Auto Clubs. I think the track absolutely deserves a date. I really hope and pray they can find a way to get racing there, as I think Auto Club is a fantastic facility, and I really hope that we do get a chance and opportunity to be racing Auto Club next year, though they're probably going to have a new name change, among other things, as the name expired as well. So we'll see if we do get to go back to Auto Club Speedway in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Erik Jones. Now, there's been a lot of people asking questions surrounding Erik Jones' future on whether or not he's going to return to Legacy Motor Club in 2025, or if he's going to leave the team at the end of this year. Well, according to Bob Pockers, he reported that he expects that Erik Jones will return to Legacy Motor Club in 2025. Now, Erik Jones does have a contract through this year with Legacy, but he has not signed a contract extension with Legacy for the 2025 year. From what I understand, the big reason why is because they're looking to try to get a multi-year deal done so that Erik Jones can be full-time with the team and organization going into the long-term future. Erik Jones has been driving the 43 car for the last 4 years, and I think Erik Jones has done a very solid job with the team. 2021 wasn't the greatest season in the world, but you go back to 2022, in consistent points, he was competing in the top 15 in the standings pretty much all year long, and of course he won the Southern 500 2 years ago in that legendary 43 car. 2023 took a step backwards because the team was kind of going through moves where they're going to be moving over to Toyota. In 2024, he unfortunately kind of suffered a little bit of an injury that kind of affected his on-track performance. Even though I think he's had some pretty standout runs recently, and I feel like the 43 team is starting to show speed like they did about a year or so ago. I think Erik Jones is a very talented race car driver, and the main question is now, if somehow Erik Jones does in fact leave Legacy Motor Club at the end of this year, where could Erik Jones end up going? Where a team I could see him going to is Spire Motorsports. We're going to talk about the current driver who will not be back at the team with Spire in just a little bit here, but I do think Erik Jones could be a surprise candidate for that team. I also could see him going to a team like RCR if they were to decide to expand, though we are not expecting currently at the moment that Richard Schultz Racing is going to expand in the next year. That was only if Noah Gragson was going to go over there, and we know Noah Gragson is going over to Front Row full time in 2025. But I do think Erik Jones return to Legacy also make a lot of sense. He's been in the team for a long time, and he's been in the Cup Series now for nearly a decade. I do think he will come back to Legacy, though they need to get a contract done at this point. But trust me, I do think they're going to get a contract extension done, and I do truly believe that Erik Jones is going to be sticking around and will be staying with Legacy Motor Club for the long-term future. I think he will come back to Legacy next year, and I think, in fact, will sign a multi-year contract extension so he can stay with Legacy Motor Club for the long-term future. I think it's going to be a 2 to 3 year deal at least. I think he will 100% stick around and drive for Legacy Motor Club once again in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now we're going to talk about Kyle Busch's contract situation at the end of this episode, but let's first talk about something that kind of surfaced on social media. Now, Samantha Busch put up an Instagram photo, and I think Mario Lost Games on Twitter actually kind of put the tweet out, which the tweet that he kind of put out was really, really funny. But if you actually take a look at Kyle Busch's hand and arm, it looks like Kyle Busch might have suffered a sprain. Basso48, who does a lot of replay stuff among other things, actually posted a video where Kyle Busch was only using one hand to take his helmet off, and he was really nursing his hand just a little bit, and he actually had to get a lot of people from Richard Childress Racing to really help him out get that helmet off. That is really unfortunate. It just continues the bad season that Kyle Busch has been having so far. Now, later in the day, Samantha did basically get rid of it, and they never ended up showing the arm brace that Kyle Busch had. Now, does this mean that Kyle Busch is going to be out of a car for the remainder of the year? Absolutely not. It's probably just a sprain at this point. It's probably from the crash that happened at the Brickyard 400 on Sunday afternoon, or last Sunday. It's probably when he did get the injury there. That being said, it is kind of just a kind of collection of how bad of a year Kyle Busch really has had so far this year. You think about the lack of speed, and every time Kyle Busch tries to outperform that equipment and tries to get the best finish he can as he wants to, every time he ends up unfortunately crashing out of these events. And I think it's just because he's not overachieving, but he's overdriving the cars a bit, and unfortunately it's causing a lot of wrecks and mistakes. In the last 8 points-paying races in Cup, he has had 5 DNFs. Including at basically Indianapolis, where unfortunately finished 25th or 26th, when he was more than likely going to get a top 5 or even a top 6 finish. And had he stayed there, he would have at least gained some points on the championship. Now Kyle Busch absolutely has to win a race, and his most likely shot to get a win before the end of this year is most likely going to be at Daytona. So he really just needs to be careful what he's doing going forward, and just needs to not be wrecking himself and making a lot of mistakes. And I am hoping that Kyle Busch can get better and more healthy, so he definitely can continue racing going forward, because we don't want Kyle Busch to stay around, right? We want him to see him competitive. And I just saw that injury, and it's just like a culmination on how bad generally this year has been for Kyle Busch, right? It's just been a frustrating year. I know he wants to run better. I know he wants to be competitive, make those cars faster. We know RCR is planning to make some major executive changes. The question will be, will those help? We don't know at this point. I'm hoping for Kyle's sake, though, that he can get better from the injury he suffered, and that Kyle Busch can be better and get ready for the remainder of the year. He's got a week off basically at this point to get better. Hopefully he can get better so he can go out there and compete for the remainder of the 2024 season and get prepared for 2025 as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the next-gen car and some criticisms. Now, Skid on Twitter put up a little bit of a photo, or actually a video, from Actions Detrimental, the podcast that Denny Hamlin and Jared Allen run. And quintessentially, Denny Hamlin was going on and criticizing the next-gen car once again. He basically said that the next-gen car is absolutely terrible in traffic. This, of course, was in reference to what happened at the Brickyard 400, where a lot of people were not able to pass. Now, that being said, Kyle Larson was able to drive his way up to the field, but remember, everyone was running at half speed. So Kyle Larson was very, very impressive on that day and drove up to the field, which is realistically and historically at the Brickyard 400, it can be very, very difficult to pass. Now, something that kind of caught my eye from this video is that apparently there was not much testing done in traffic. Denny Hamlin had reportedly told John Probst 3 times, did you test this car in traffic? And John said, yeah, we got to figure it out. We did some testing. Well, they basically did their first test with the cars in traffic in December, back in 2021, before going into 2022. And then Denny says that, oh crap, we got a problem. Yeah, you didn't do much testing. That's what Denny said. And I 100% agree when it comes to the next-gen car. One of the biggest problems that the next-gen car has is this car is terrible in traffic. You get within about 3 or 4 tenths of a car in front of you, you get this huge amount of wake and this massive amount of dirty air. We have seen this at many races this year. You go back to the battle between Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin at Dover earlier this year. You look at other races like Indianapolis, where it was super difficult to pass. You look at other races throughout the year, because this car cannot follow very, very well, and you cannot run these cars close enough to where you can make a move. And it does frustrate the competitors, and it frustrates the drivers as well. To me, when I look at the stuff with the next-gen car, one of the biggest things that I've seen a lot of people talk about, I think Real Radman mentioned this on his video as well, is that one thing is the rear diffuser is playing a major role in this. Because Joe Logano even said this on his podcast about a month or 2 ago. He basically said that the rear diffuser has changed how these cars race. Do I think a little bit of adding a little bit more horsepower would fix some of these issues? Maybe, but I don't think it's going to fix every little problem. You got to do a lot of inherent things that really will fix the issues with this next-gen car. And I think that basically a redesign. Number one, they need to not just have that rear diffuser there. That's a big, big problem this car has. Did they really have to add the rear diffuser? I don't think so. That's one thing that I would not have a major issue with them getting rid of it, because Denny Hamlin even mentions with the Xfinity car, and they weren't even running full horsepower, by the way. They were running a restrictor engine quintessentially, and they were running basically really, really close, and they could get there and move a driver up, manipulate those cars, and move and get by them. The big problem, like I said, with this next-gen car is you can't get behind him and be able to make moves. And that is a massive and major problem that this next-gen car truly has. And I think that for this car to put on great racing, you got to be able to find a way to make passes, and you're not seeing that currently with the next-gen car. So I really hope that they can find a way to go ahead and fix those issues. I think there's just a redesign that really needs to happen for stuff like this to happen. So we'll see what happens going into the future, but I really hope and pray that they can find a way to fix the issues in the next-gen car so we can get better racing going forward in the future in the next-gen era, especially on the short tracks. Maybe a new package would really help that going into the future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, someone asked a question to Bob Pockers about maybe Connor Zilisch being a possible candidate to drive the number 7 car in 2025. Well, Bob actually responded to this individual by basically saying that he does expect that Connor Zilisch more than likely will be full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. Now, where could Connor Zilisch be headed? Well, according to reports from Adam Stern about a month or two ago, is expected that Connor Zilisch more than likely will join Junior Motorsports full-time in the 2025 season. Connor Zilisch is one of the hottest young prospects moving up to the ranks currently at the moment. He's won 3 ARCA races so far this year. He won the 12 Hours of Sebring earlier in the year in the LMP2 class, and also won the 24 Hours Daytona in the LMP2 class as well, and has also won some Cars Late Model Tour races and some ARCA East races, and more than likely is going to win the ARCA East Championship this year as well. I rate Connor Zilisch very, very highly. He's a racing prodigy, a super talented race car driver who can absolutely 100% get the best out of equipment. And I think if he goes to Junior Motorsports full-time next year, whether it is the 1 or the 9 car next year, he is going to be a championship threat and contender. He is an incredible road course racer. He's really good on any type of track. And keep in mind, he just turned 18 years old. He's going to get to run some bigger oval races later this year. He's got some races scheduled with Junior Motorsports later this year. That first race being at Watkins Glen, which I think he's going to be a major threat and contender to win. You go back to the ARCA race he ran last year where he should have won the race. He had a broken sway bar and basically won until the last lap of the event. I think Connor Zilisch will be a championship contender if he goes to JRM. He could also go to Kaulig Racing next year, but everyone is believing that Connor will go full-time. Now, the question is, at Junior Motorsports, what number is he going to drive? I think it's going to be the 1 car most likely. We know that Sam Mayer more than likely is moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time next year. Whether that is with Spire or Front Row, that is still to be determined at this point. There's also a chance he could go to the 9 car potentially next year. That could be another option going into 2025. But I do think that Connor Zilisch will be driving more than likely the 1 car next season. I think Connor is a super talented race car driver who can absolutely 100%, without doubt, get the best out of equipment. So I really think he deserves this chance and opportunity, and I think regardless of where he does end up next year, I think he will be very, very fast. So I'm really excited about this for sure, wherever he ends up going. Again, it still hasn't been announced at this point, but many people do believe within the coming days, or months I should say, we should know that Connor Zilisch will be going full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And like I said, I think Connor is a super great race car driver who can absolutely get the best out of equipment and always runs up front in every series that he ends up running in. So I think he will be in Xfinity full-time next year, and I think he most likely takes the 1 car for Junior Motorsports in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. I think he will be in the 1 car next year in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. As we did a video covering this on the channel last week, but it was shockingly announced on Thursday that Corey LaJoie will not be returning to Spire Motorsports in 2025. Spire Motorsports later that day did release a statement saying that as much as Corey LaJoie has been a cornerstone of this organization for the last 2 years, they were looking at performance. And Corey LaJoie, according to them, had not been performing up to the potential level they really really expected Corey LaJoie to run at. This means that Corey LaJoie has joined the free agent market for 2025. About a week or two ago, if you would have told me that Corey LaJoie potentially was going to be a free agent on the free agent market, I would have laughed at you, because Corey LaJoie has been with Spire Motorsports for years. And remember, it was announced just about a week or two ago that Corey LaJoie was going to be crew chief by Rodney Childers. While they didn't have that in the original release on the Twitter titles, if you go through the press release, they said that Rodney Childers was going to be the crew chief for Corey LaJoie. So this shocked a lot of people in the industry. As much as it sucks to see that Corey LaJoie does not have a ride currently at the moment for 2025, this is also not the most surprising thing to see, right? Let's be real and frank. Corey LaJoie has been struggling this year. He has had a horrendous year. He's taken a major step backwards from last year, and he's only had one top 5 finish this year, and that's on a super speedway. And keep in mind, Corey LaJoie has still, in nearly 260 starts in Cup, has failed to score a single top 10 finish on a non-drafting track. All of his top 10 finishes, the 8 or 9 that he's had, have all been on drafting tracks, whether that's Daytona, Atlanta, or Talladega. He has not been able to get a non-top 10 finish, on a non-super speedway, which is just ridiculous in my opinion. And you've got to look at drivers that are really good, that are on the market, right? And let's just be real. We've seen Spire Motorsports making a lot of massive, major, and big moves, and they want to continue to get better. They're bringing Michael McDowell into the team next year. We know Michael McDowell will be in the 71 next year, most likely with Travis Peterson being the crew chief. We know that Carson Ospar is sticking around. They bought KBM's team and organization up for the Truck Series, and they're in that shop currently at the moment. So they were absolutely looking for someone that really was going to help the team. And they had to kind of look at themselves and say, is Corey LaJoie going to be that guy that's going to get better for the team? And they just were unfortunately like, no, there's not that guy who's really going to do great things for our team and organization next year. Now, we'll speculate a little bit when we get to the silly season part, who I think could be a candidate for this ride. But as for Corey LaJoie, I really don't know where he goes next year, to be honest. We're so late into this silly season. I feel like this is very, very late to announce this for a driver like Corey, that you're not going to be back with a team and an organization. So I really don't know where Corey goes. You look at the options you have in Cup. Colleague Racing could be an option. Maybe an Xfinity or Cup, that could absolutely be an option for next year. Corey does, I think, have a few sponsors that are willing to walk them over to one of those organizations. So I could see him definitely going over to a team like that next year. Ricker Racing could also be an option next year. That could certainly be a possibility, with rumors of maybe Justin Haley moving to another team, though we are expecting Justin Haley's going to stay in the 51 car next year. I do think that could be a potential possibility as well for 2025. I also think Xfinity or Trucks wouldn't be a bad option. Maybe he becomes an outside candidate for the Haas factory team. That could be certainly an option there. What about Junior Motorsports? JR might have a couple seats available next year. Could we see him go there? That could be a possibility. And there's also some Truck Series rides that might be available going into 2025 as well for him. At this point, Corey LaJoie, you got to remember, he's 33 years old this year, and he just really is not stepping up to the plate, unfortunately. Just has not been running well. And I think a lot of this decision really came from what happened at Pocono. He caused a big wreck, caused a big incident, and we know Kyle Busch works with them over at Spire. So they probably saw the incident, and Corey wasn't taking responsibility for it, and that frustrated the team and organization. And the performance just has not been there. So at this particular moment in point, I think Corey LaJoie's future is kind of uncertain at the moment right now, where he's going to end up going. I do think he'll be racing in NASCAR in some sort of capacity, but I do not think he will be in the Cup Series at all, unfortunately, at least full-time in the 2025 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR silly season once again. Now, Bob Pockrass put out another update to his driver lineup predictions for the 2025 season. There's been some interesting changes from the article that Bob Pockrass put out. Let's first begin by talking about 23. Actually, let's go through the teams that we know that are completely set. We know Hendrick Motorsports, they're set for 2025. Alex Bowman will be back in the 48 car next year, despite people trying to say that he's going to be a free agent. Alex Bowman will be back in the 48. Kyle Larson is set through 2026. William Byron is set through 25 and will likely get an extension. And we know Chase Elliott is set through the 2027 year. Joe Gibbs Racing, they're completely set for next year. Denny Hamlin will be back in 11, though he'll be likely a free agent at the end of next year. Chase Briscoe will be in the 19 car. We know that got confirmed about a month or two ago. Chris Zarrell will be in the 20 car, and Ty Gibbs will be in the 54 car in 2025. Let's now talk about 2311 Racing. 2311, they've got 3 cars for 2025 more than likely. Bubba Wallace, while he's not signed a contract extension with the organization at this point, it is expected that Bubba Wallace is going to sign a multi-year extension with 2311 Racing. Bubba has been getting better with the team. He's been running up front a lot more consistently, and the pace and speed has seemed to be there the last few weeks. So I think Bubba Wallace will 100% be back in that car, and I think he'll continue doing great things with the team. The big question is surrounding the third car. Will it be Riley Herbst or Corey Heim behind the wheel of the third seat? We are expecting that Riley Herbst is going to get that third car from 2311 Racing. We know Corey's a very talented driver, but many people do think, and some people think, that he's probably not ready to move up, which I entirely disagree. I do think that Riley Herbst should absolutely be considered to move up in 2025 for sure. But I think Riley Herbst likely gets a seat for 2025. I do think Corey Heim, though, could end up in a 4th car next year, 2311. We know Martin Truex Jr. is expected to run part-time with the team. Maybe have Corey Heim drive a few select races. Maybe Carlos Kerber should want to come out of retirement as well. But I do think you're going to see Riley Herbst get the 3rd seat next year. Let's now talk about Team Penske. They're completely set for 2025. While Austin Cindric has not signed an extension with his team, he will be back in that 2 car next year. There's not a lot of really good options out there available unless they somehow wanted to get Corey LaJoie. And Ryan Blaney and Joe Logano have long-term extensions. Josh Berry will be in the Wood Brothers. We know that got confirmed not too long ago as well. Let's now talk about Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing still has 2 rides that are not signed for 2025 at the moment because they're also going to get a 3rd charter from Stewart Haas Racing going into next year. It's coming down between Zane Smith and SVG for the 3rd ride at the moment, and many people do believe that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get the 3rd car in 2025. Shane has been impressing on the ovals this year, has continued to get better, and the pace and speed and performance has just continued to get better for Shane Van Gisbergen. He just finished in the top 5 at Indianapolis, and he's also got 3 wins this year. He is still the winningest driver in the Xfinity Series currently at the moment. So I do believe that you're going to see him get that 3rd car. Plus, he's got sponsorship from companies like WeatherTech and, of course, Wendy's, among other companies working with them. Now, speaking of Zane Smith is in the running to stay with Spire Motorsports next year, but also could be headed to Front Row Motorsports in 2025. According to reports, it's coming down right now between Zane Smith and Sam Mayer for that 3rd front row seat. We know Noah Gragson, of course, will be in the 34 most likely, and we know that, of course, Todd Gillen has signed a multi-year extension as well with the team. It's coming down between Zane Smith and Sam Mayer. I think Zane Smith would be the better option for the seat going into next year, but Sam Mayer also would not be an awful option to go with next year. So I could absolutely see Sam Mayer getting the 3rd seat of front row, and maybe Zane Smith sticking around with Spire Motorsports with Trackhouse, continuing to work with him. Speaking of Spire Motorsports, with the 7 car now officially available, it's coming down to multiple drivers. Sam Mayer is a candidate for sure for the 7 car, but Ryan Preece and Justin Haley are 2 names that Bob Pockris mentioned as potential candidates. Ryan Preece does have a little bit of sponsorship and funding with him going into next year, and I do think he might bring that over, but I also think that Ryan Preece more than likely is going to go to the Haas factory team in 2025. Justin Haley's name continues to get mentioned as a possibility for an organization. I think Justin would be a really good option for a team like going back to Spire, but I also think more than likely he is going to stick around and continue driving for Rick Ware Racing for the long-term future. He's done great with the team this year. He's 29th in the standings and has performing at a very exceptional level. Then you got to look at Kaulig Racing. This could be where Corey LaJoie goes next year potentially. You've got AJ Allmendinger, who could also be back in Cup. Christian Eckes is also mentioned as a possibility, and I think there's some other major moves that are going to happen in this silly season that's going to change a lot of things. Silly season continues to get crazy. We know Junior Motorsports also isn't going Cup racing next year at this time, but we do know there could be some other major silly season bombshells and moves that could happen throughout the rest of the year, and we'll continue to follow the rest of the silly season as time progresses and goes on through the remainder of this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we already talked about the fact that Corey LaJoie will not be returning to Spire Motorsports for the 2025 season. And one name that a lot of people have been linking to potentially going to Spire Motorsports in 2025 is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has been working with Spire Motorsports all year so far. Remember, I already mentioned this with the Corey LaJoie story, but Spire Motorsports had actually purchased Kyle Busch Motorsports, the shop and organization, and they're basically running a lot of KBM trucks currently at the moment. And Kyle Busch is currently working as a consultant for Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I have to imagine he played a major role in Corey LaJoie losing his seat. And many people have been linking Kyle Busch to getting in that third seat for 2025 at the number 7 car. So will that happen? Well, according to Bob Pockers, it sounds like Kyle Busch is expected to be back at back at Rich Chols Racing in 2025. He says, well, it's not all set in stone at this point that Kyle Busch will be back at Richard Chols Racing next year. We all do believe that Kyle Busch will be in the number 8 car once again, and even Austin Dillon said that Kyle Busch at least is committed not just for 2025, but also for 2026 as well. Now, like I said, I do think Kyle Busch more than likely is going to return to RCR next year. Do I think going over to Spire Motorsports would make a lot of sense right now? Yes, absolutely. RCR has been struggling immensely this year so far. The pace and speed has just not been there for the number 18. They've been not great, and while they were good early in the year, and they probably should have won a race or two early in the season, really the last 8 or 9 weeks has been a struggle for Kyle Busch. But I think all around you look at Chevrolet, right? Chevrolet as a whole, they are completely struggling. The pace and speed is not there for the Chevrolet cars, and they're just not running up front on a consistent basis. And I think look at Spire Motorsports. They're a team that's on the up and up. They're hiring a lot of big names. They got Carson Osbar for a few more years. They got Michael McDowell for 2025. And they're bringing Rodney Childers on. Everyone kind of linked Kyle Busch over to Spire Motorsports, right? Because he works with them. And Rodney Childers, we know that RCR was trying to pick up Rodney Childers for 2025. We know they were looking at him. Every organization was looking to pick up Rodney Childers because of how good he is. But I don't think Rodney was going to be a crew chief. And I'll be real and frank. Randall Burnett is a pretty solid crew chief, in my honest opinion. I think he's a fantastic talent. He's a great crew chief. But Rodney Childers is definitely a better crew chief than Randall Burnett. So had Rodney got to work with RCR, I think he would have been the crew chief. That being said, going back to Kyle Busch, I think there's a really good chance that 2025 most likely is going to be the last year for Kyle Busch at Richard Chols Racing. Because this is basically the year they picked up the option year. I think 2025 is going to be Kyle Busch's last year at RCR. I think he's going to struggle, unfortunately, next year unless they can find some really great executives they can bring into the team to really fix the major problems at the organization. I think next year will be his last year, and maybe somehow Spire finds a way to buy him out of his contract, which I don't think is out of the realm of a question and possibility either. Spire Motorsports, they're made of a lot of money, and with Kyle Busch already having a working relationship with Spire, I think it would be a lot easier to make this move. Look, but RCR, we know they want to get better. There's no denying that. But at the same time, when you look at their team and organization currently at the moment right now, the performance just isn't there, sadly, for RCR. And they're not getting better. They're getting worse, it seems like. Because when Kyle Busch joined RCR last year, he won 3 races in the first 14 events. And we all kind of thought, hey, Kyle Busch might have a really great chance and a fantastic and strong opportunity to win a championship. But it just seems like the honeymoon phase has really worn off. The speed isn't there, and every time Kyle Busch seems to have a fantastic and great car to go out there and maybe contend for a win and a victory, he just overdrives the car and makes a lot of mistakes. And I think the big problem is Kyle Busch is driving in a car that just at this particular moment right now is not running fast. Which is why I think next year, like I already mentioned, this is probably going to be the last year for Kyle in the number 8 car. I know that he probably wants to stay with RCR, but I think when you have a team like Spire Motorsports who's getting better, who wants to win a championship, I think the best thing that they could do in the future is bring Kyle Busch in. You maybe have Zane Smith in the 7 car at least for a year or two, and then you move Kyle Busch into that team. That would make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, with Kyle Busch, if he would somehow and shockingly leave RCR at the end of the year, who would take over his car? Austin Hill will be the easy answer, right? Austin Hill has been in the Xfinity Series for a long time. I think Austin does have a lot of talent. I know I've been critical of him many, many times, but I do think Austin Hill has a massive amount of talent, and I do think he's someone that can do a solid and great job if you put him in a Cup Series car next year. So I do think more than likely Kyle Busch does stick around, though. I think Jess Love's another driver to look at as well as a potential possibility. But again, I do think that Kyle Busch will be back at RCR next year. It's expected that he is going to sign a multi-year extension with the team, at least only a 1-year extension, I should say, or they exercise the option at this point. But 2025 could be the last year that he is at Richard Childress Racing, and I do truly believe that 2025, in fact, will be the final year that you will see Kyle Busch driving an RCR car in the NASCAR Cup Series. And I think 2026 will be the year, more than likely, that you will see Kyle Busch move over there. I think it makes way too much sense at this point. I think 2025 will be the last year Kyle is at RCR. But that being said, I do think Kyle Busch 100% for sure will be back with Richard Childress Racing in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan once again. Now, we've talked about Hailie Deegan a lot on this channel over the course of the last 2 weeks. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, during the Chicago Street Course weekend, it was announced that Hailie Deegan would not be driving a 15 car for AM Racing at the Chicago Street Course. Joey Logano took over her seat. Then it was announced right before Pocono happened that Hailie Deegan would not be returning to AM Racing for 2024 for the remainder of the year and would not be back with the team also in 2025. And for the last couple races that we've ran, since we're currently on the break, Josh Berry was the latest driver to get behind the wheel. We do not know at this time who will be behind the wheel of the 15 car. Then we started hearing some chatter about a week ago that apparently Hailie Deegan, we know she's been over in the rumors that maybe she could go to Indy NXT in some sort of capacity in 2024 at the end of the year, run some ovals. And she also did some Trans Am racing very recently at Lime Rock Park during when the IROC series was making a comeback and doing their first event back. And some thought she was going to be racing in IROC, though that did not end up happening. But a big thing that kind of brought it to attention is during the Brickyard weekend, it was announced that Cole Custer will be joining Haas factory team in the NASCAR Cup Series driving the number 41 car, which means they have both Xfinity Series cars for Haas factory currently available. And many do believe that Hailie Deegan's name is a very likely possibility to be driving a Haas factory seat in 2025. Joe Custer did confirm at the Indianapolis weekend during the press conference that Hailie Deegan and them have had conversations about her potentially driving a Haas factory car for the 2025 year. And you look at Hailie Deegan, she is a talented driver. And they basically said that they see a lot of potential in her, and they do see that while she has struggled a little bit, they do see a lot of potential in her. And I think this is why she will end up over there. One, she does have a little bit of sponsorship in funding with her going into 2025. While Monster hasn't been fully funding her in the last couple years or so, I do think Monster will back her a little bit as well, considering they back Riley Hurts, who's likely going to be bringing his funding over to 2311 next year. I do think that Hailie Deegan will be in that number 98 most likely in 2025. I think Hailie Deegan needs a team that's really going to help her. Let's be real and honest. Hailie Deegan completely struggled in the Truck Series over the last few years. 2021 was a massive struggle with DJR Racing, which became Tricon Garage. It was a really bad rookie year. 2022, she improved very, very slightly, but didn't really do much better. And then 2023, she only got 2 top 10 finishes with Thorsport Racing, which is not good in my opinion. In fact, it's really, really bad, and you're not running good if you're struggling that much. Then she went to Xfinity full-time this year of AM Racing, and she just absolutely did not have a good time. That being said, when you have a rookie driver who's joining a team that is super young and doesn't have that veteran really helping them, you're not going to run as well as an organization. That's why we saw Joe Logano do a great job, but they were having issues figuring out air pressure changes at Chicago. And then obviously Josh Berry's had 2 races where they crashed out or had tire issues or something like that. The team just isn't really up to par, and I think AM Racing was a major problem. If she joins a team like Haas Factory, I do think Hailie Deegan actually will run a lot better. Now, do I think Hailie Deegan's going to go out there and win races? No, absolutely not. I know Joe Custer has said publicly that their ultimate goal is to go out there and win races, but we do have to be realistic when it comes to Hailie Deegan. We should not be expecting her to go out there and win races. Now, should we expect her to potentially make the playoffs? Yeah, I think that should be a really high goal for her. I think the goal for her next year is that she should be able to try to go ahead and make the playoffs. I think of how, because the Xfinity Series field is going to be somewhat competitive next year. Connor Zilic is expected to be in the Xfinity Series next year, full-time. Though we know that Sam Mayer's moving up potentially next year. Shane Gisberg, and he's expected to move up next year. And we know that Cole Custer, Riley Hurts, they're both for sure moving up. But I think she also is going to need a veteran teammate that's really going to help her. I think bringing Ryan Preece into the organization to be your teammate would make an absolute ton of sense. Ryan has been driving for these Haas cars, and he actually worked with Hailie Deegan in the truck series a few years ago when he was driving for DJR. So I think if you had Ryan Preece there to really help her and guide her, I think Ryan could be a really big help and a massive guide to really get her developed. I think you need to have a team that's around you. Look at Riley Herbst. When he joined the Stewart Haas organization in 2021, he completely struggled. He was completely out for lunch, and then he figured it out really quickly. And I'm not saying that Riley Herbst is worse than Hailie Deegan. I think Hailie is a worse driver than Riley. But I think if you have a team around her that can really help her and guide her like an established organization, I think that could really help her in a massive and big way. But if she does go to Haas next year, this will be your last chance. Hailie Deegan is only 24 years old, 23. Let's keep that in mind. She is still a relatively young race car driver, but she is going to have very high expectations next year. And I think people have to be very, very realistic. I think her leaving Toyota a long time ago really did hurt her, and I think going back to Toyota would have also made a lot of sense, but I do think Hailie Deegan going to Haas factory would also make a lot of sense because of sponsorship that she is going to be bringing to the team. So we'll see what happens in regards to Hailie Deegan and whether or not she does go to Haas factory. Realistically, I think she will end up there, but we'll have to see what she ends up doing for the 2025 NASCAR season. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Hailie Deegan is going to join Haas? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Kyle Busch somehow shockingly leaves RCR at the end of this year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. More than likely, tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have 10 drivers who could join the Haas factory team for 2025. Wednesday, if there's enough NASCAR news to cover, we'll discuss that here on the channel. If any major news breaks over the course of the next 2 weeks, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.